Dear viewers, thank you for joining us. You are watching OBN Horn of Africa. This is Talk to OBN show. I am your host, Addis Asafa. My guest today is Bilene Siyum, Press Secretary for Prime Minister Office of Ethiopia. Bilene, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, Addis, and thank you for having me.
Let's directly go to our dialogue. The past 2 years and so is considered as a reform period, right? What are the major reforms undertaken by the new government?
So indeed, over the past 2.5 years, it is considered a reform period, and it's still an ongoing process as well. Before I get into the details of what were some of the key demonstrations of what these reforms are, I would like to articulate the nature of reforms as well. Reforms by nature are deep, they take time, they happen over a long period of time, and sometimes one thing that you change or one process that you reform or one law that you reform will take a certain amount of time to realize for it to manifest effectively within a given system as well. So within the context of this administration and the steps that it has been taking over the past 2.5 years, it's not only on one area. There are deep reforms across multi-dimensional reforms that have been taken. They cut across the political space, they cut across the economic arena, they cut across social reforms as well. So this administration embarked on a deep reform process with the premiership of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and through that has initiated a lot of changes and a lot of processes that are components of this reform process as well. When we go a little bit second layer into what these reforms are, the first one that we can look at is the political reforms that have been undertaken. Now, yes, it's been said a lot about what some of these changes have been, and they're very well noted. I could repeat them, it would be a repetition, but it's also important to understand the nuances and the context for those political reforms and what they actually mean. When the Prime Minister came into the premiership in 2018 and the new administration and the new regime came into play, we had just transitioned out of about 27 years or 28 years of deep repression. So the political environment could not be said that it was a multi-party political environment. It was an environment in which a lot of political parties had been exiled. It was a political environment in which a lot of dissent was repressed. People who had differing political opinions, who had different political thoughts and ideas, could not articulate them in a free and open space. And there were actually a lot of people who were imprisoned for their political consciousness and their political activism as well. So part of the reforms that were taken with the new administration came into play is opening up the space. So by opening up the space, number one, it was releasing thousands of prisoners who were imprisoned for their political activism, as I had mentioned before. Secondly, it was inviting parties that had been deemed as terrorists under the anti-terrorism proclamation before. So inviting them out of exile and asking them to come and engage in a peaceful political struggle as well. So there was many processes that had been undertaken, and once some of these political parties did come into the country, one of the critical factors as part of the political reforms was opening up the political space, and that entailed the Prime Minister inviting political parties that were all registered within the country, and by now all these political parties have reached around 130 in our context, and I'll get to that later on. But at that point in time, all these political parties came for the first dialogue, and they held consultations with the Prime Minister to determine what is our way forward. What does it mean with the opening up of this political space? How do we utilize it consciously? How do we utilize it effectively for the growth, for the development and the prosperity of Ethiopian people? And how do we bring our ideas to the table? Whereas before, political contestations were done through the barrel of the gun, whereas political contestations and any differing ideas would subject manufacturing as well. So just as a starting point, these are some of the key reform perspectives.
Good, Your Excellency Bilene. Of course, we have witnessed so many progress as you have mentioned, but still this progress is under threat, and we are witnessing challenges which are said to be bottlenecks for these reforms. What are the reason for such challenges?
I think reform processes by nature will introduce challenges. I don't necessarily think that there's any smooth reform process. There will be people that are fully on board, and there will be people or individuals or groups whose interests through this reform process will be somehow touched. So there is a protection of those interests as well. And as I was mentioning, part of the reforms or the political reforms is really looking at a social justice perspective as well. So righting the wrongs that had existed before as well, righting the wrongs in the political space, righting the wrongs in the economic space. So if you look at the economic space, for example, within Ethiopia, one of the key issues for governance was corruption as well. So highlighting those key factors and wanting to change them would really start shaking the foundations for a lot of individual and group interests as well. So that's one aspect of perhaps what I think would pose as a threat to this reform process. The other component or the other element, I would say, is political interests that are not political interests, or individuals or groups with political interests who are not able to play within the given playing field. As I mentioned to you, a key characteristic of this administration and the aspiration of this administration for Ethiopia's democratization, fulfilling Ethiopia's democratization path, is to ensure and to enable that political contestation happen around the table, the proverbial table where discussions happen, where ideas can clash, but then ideas are not necessarily people, and people can walk away and say that I have shifted from this form of thinking, I have shifted from this perspective, but with the interest at heart of the Ethiopian people at large. So the practice has not been there. If you look at our political history, a lot of political contestations have come into culmination through the barrel of the gun. So moving away from that is one, like I was talking about, there's privileged groups, there's certain interests, people with political desires who are not able to play within this playing field that's been created for these kind of democratic political contestations to take place. So I think that is one of the factors, and it's related with the mindset as well. So this is something that's going to take a while. Yes, Ethiopia is within a phase of a democratization process. It doesn't mean that things will happen right away, but there's certain processes, there's certain elements that need to be fulfilled as we realize the democratic environment that we want to create within Ethiopia, and that requires engagement in a peaceful way. It requires engagement in a way that serves the purpose and the desires of the Ethiopian people at the center of it.
Thank you. Another question. We are still witnessing people and groups who fully favor the new government, the new administration. In the meantime, we are witnessing some people, some groups who detest the reform and the new administration as well. Why such controversies happened between the same people, between the same groups, between the same nation?
Well, I mean, I would throw back a question at you and say, what are we using to determine, what are we using, or what is our indicator to determine whether these divisions really exist within this country? Because Ethiopia is a huge country with over 110 million people. So if we're using, and I think most of the time that is where a lot of our focus is, if we're using social media as an indicator, then I don't think social media really reflects the reality of Ethiopians, because a majority of our people live within rural areas as well, and a majority of our people are looking to sustain their livelihoods in a meaningful way as well. And these processes and these initiatives that have been introduced over the past 2.5 years, and as they mature into fruition, are in support of the major aspirations for prosperity of the Ethiopian people as well. So yes, there are small groups that may be vocal, and in opposition to some of these reforms. But for me personally, I relate them to what I expressed to you earlier. It's not having or not wanting to engage in the space to politically contest, because for you to oppose something, you need to also come with an equally, profound, not only logical ground, but also an alternative. So if you're opposing, it can't just be for the mere, existence of it, for the mere existence of something. It has to be because you're providing an alternative in the best interest of the Ethiopian people, not in your individual interest or in the interest of your group, whichever one that you identify with, but it has to be in the interest of the general Ethiopian population.
I appreciate one thing. The moment Abiy took office, he has appointed 50% of female cabinets, right? Has got international reputation by doing this. Was that, correct decision? And are those female individuals on post are doing good?
Personally, I think it's a critical decision. It's not only a correct decision, but it's a critical decision as part of Ethiopia's new chapter. For the past how many years, we have been talking about gender equality, political inclusion, social inclusion at various levels. Yet this equalizing of the cabinet is one critical manifestation or demonstration of owning this rhetoric of gender equality within government spaces as well. And it's not only at the cabinet level. If you look at the second layer, at the state minister level as well, there's a lot of women that have also come to the forefront as well. So it's important, and I think they're doing magnificently. I don't necessarily think that there is a comparison. Everybody is given their assignment based on the institutional requirements or the institutional mandate that they're supposed to deliver. And so far, everybody is delivering accordingly, in my personal opinion. But beyond the delivery component of it, I think it's an important and critical decision as well, because you are also, for these women, they're also role models by their mere presence and by their mere visibility at this level, leading large institutions that are transforming the lives of many Ethiopians, that are impacting, the aspirations of where this country wants to be in its prosperity path. For them to be part of this journey, to be visible, is allowing many young women who are looking at them to also aspire for these kind of engagements and see themselves in their shoes and work towards that excellence as well. So I think it was a very phenomenal decision.
Parallelly with the reform undertaken, we've been witnessing again casualties and displacement and unrest and mass human rights violation in Ethiopia, right? But no one was there to take the responsibility. No one claimed the responsibility, right? What do you say about it?
The causes of displacement, there has always been displacement even before as well. And if we're looking at the causes of displacement over the past 2.5 years, they have been related to, as you say, violence that have been perpetrated by groups that are not willing to play within the confines of the created, playing field. So wanting to bring into fruition their ideas or their desires, not by appealing to alternatives, not by appealing to the Ethiopian people's ultimate and true needs, but by enforcing it, and by enforcing it through violent means as well. So there has been casualties as a result of that. There has been casualties also through inter-communal violence as well, that has been, again, perpetrated by different groups to foment these kind of grievances among communities. For a country that's 110 million, like I mentioned to you, plus 110 million, for a country that's multi-ethnic, that's diverse religiously, ethnically, in so many components, very diverse, Ethiopia has sustained or has come this far really in harmony, in a spirit of coexistence as well. So these pockets of incidences, because they're pockets of incidents, they don't necessarily describe what's happening throughout the country. But these pockets of incidents don't necessarily define, the state of where Ethiopia is at this moment in time. The other component of some of these displacements that has happened is natural disasters as well. So as recently as well, you've seen in about 5 regions within the country, there has been...
let alone the natural disaster, we plainly witnessing that a huge human rights violation was there, and intercommunal conflict was there, and killing of innocent people were there, but no one was there to say it's my act, or the government has failed to, disclose the group who have taken that action on the civilian. What do you say about
the government has made several statements regards to that as well. There are anti-peace elements. There are groups that are not wanting to play within what I had mentioned as the safe playing field as well. So these groups are also being being held accountable as well. And these various pockets that you've indicated, where they're fomenting divisions within communities as well, and inciting violence among communities as well. Measures have been taken in that regards. Individuals who've instigated this violence and groups that have instigated this violence as well. So part of the reforms, particularly within the judicial aspect, is holding to account groups that are perpetrating these kind of violences as well.
Good. Right after PM Abiy Ahmed took office, he has done so many things. You've mentioned some of them, right? Let's talk about repatriating the contesting political parties from abroad who were in exile, right? But later on they became threat to him, to the new administration. Was that a wrong decision? Can we say that?
I don't particularly see it as a wrong decision because the opening up of the political space entailed inviting everybody to politically participate. There were groups who, through the previous administration, for reasons that is known to the previous administration, had been brandished as terrorist groups under the anti-terrorism proclamation. But in order for Ethiopia to open up a new chapter, in order for Ethiopia to turn a page from the repressive environment that many Ethiopians have lived in for several years, it required inclusivity. So inclusivity means ensuring that all of the voices that were that had been in a way repressed from expressing what their political desires were supposed to be part of this journey as well. But as I mentioned to you earlier, being part of this new journey of Ethiopia's democratization path means that you have to act democratically as well. Whether you're a political party, whether you are an individual who has political aspirations, you have to operate within the constitutional framework that exists. You have to operate within the laws of the land. You have to operate within the context that is provided to you because it is a country of law. It is a country with constitutions. It is a country that has institutions that will take measure and will enforce the rule of law if you're trespassing that as well. And nobody is under.
Can we say genuinely that the political landscape was widened before and it's not narrowed yet?
I wouldn't say it's narrowed right now, because if you're still playing or you're still operating within the democratic space that has been provided, which means you have to understand that the Constitution is the supreme document of the country. So you have to abide by that.
So we do have a conducive political platform now?
I believe we have a conducive, we have a conducive political environment. And not only conducive, I mean, just very recently, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, there has been an ongoing political dialogue with different political parties as well. If you ask them as well, and they have also given testimony that this series of political dialogues that have been started are enabling them to also get to know each other at a human level and not just in terms of political, embattlements between each other as well. So what more is there in terms of creating that space? But again, as I was saying, contestation needs to happen within the rules of the land, and it cannot be beyond that, because if it's beyond that, then there's consequences, because everybody needs to be held accountable. Nobody is above the rule of law.
No one is underprivileged, no one is overprivileged. Good, I appreciate. Another question: after the old ruling party was dissolved a new political party has set, right? But there are still some criticism, some claim about saying the new administration is going to set a unitary government that, forbid self-rule for regional state. What do you say about it?
I think that's a very simplistic way of looking at some of these changes that have happened. It's not only simplistic, but it's a very dangerous narrative that has been spun by certain groups and individuals. And it has been spun, obviously, for their own political interests as well. But one of the critical aspects, or one of the critical aspect of the party changes that had happened was, number one, to bring periphery parties to the center.
Yeah, those
who were considered exactly ally parties, support parties, but were not really having a meaningful.
They are not supposed to be support parties because they are part of, the nation and the country as well.
So bringing them into the center means you're also bringing the voices of all of those individuals and groups that had been at the periphery as well to the center. Another critical component for this administration is, as part of spearheading this democratization process, which will take a long time, but there are still seeds that are being planted for it to fully grow and bear fruit as well. But as part of that, it's ensuring that Ethiopia is practicing a true federalism. So this notion of being a unitary government is not, it doesn't really hold water. It's so far from the truth, because the markers of this are not really even in place. So it's a weak argument in my perspective, because all of what has been happening in terms of state and federal relations so far is an indication of a strengthening of the federal system. Whereas before, roles and responsibilities may have overlapped or were very blurry, now this government is really trying to define what are the roles and responsibilities between federal government and regional government. One key demonstration, for example, is in times of any kind of incidents that happen within a regional state, in times of natural disasters that happen, it's always the request that comes to the federal government to intervene. It's based on regions' requests to actually go in and intervene that these initiatives are being undertaken. So it gives you a sense of an understanding and paying heed to the clear definitions of responsibilities, roles and responsibilities between federal and regional governments that in process will start becoming even more clear.
So shall we say the new party is pan-Ethiopian?
The new party is definitely pan-Ethiopian. I can't specifically speak on behalf of the party, but I can say definitely that process has been about ensuring that all of these periphery voices, all of these periphery identities are equally represented within a large party that is reflective and reflective of Ethiopia's reality of multi-nations.
Your Excellency Bilene, big initiatives are being undertaken in the epicenter, Finfinne, right? We know them under the umbrella of Sugar projects, right? Can you, mention them separately? What are those projects?
So these large projects, and because I'm responding to this question, just carrying off from your previous question of large public investments, it needs to be made clear that these initiatives that are happening within the capital are not, do not in any way dip into the coffers of the federal government. It's not like any budget has been assigned to it. All of this has been done through initiatives or creative ways of fundraising to be able to create these large projects and to implement these large projects as well. So yes, as you mentioned, it is under the larger umbrella of the Beautifying Shaggar or the Shaggar projects, which is looking at changing the look of the city. So not only on a superficial level as well, but making it more functional for residents and travelers who are coming to Addis Ababa as well. Addis Ababa as a city that's the capital of, or the diplomatic capital of Africa, considering that we have the African Union that is seated within the city, considering that it's also a transit hub. Ethiopian Airlines, for example, has got quite a number of destinations to various parts of the continent as well as various parts of the world as well. So it makes it a transit hub in a way as well. So considering these factors, there is going to be a lot of movement. There's going to be a lot of people coming into the city as well. So these initiatives are aimed at before where tourists would come if they do enter the city outside of the airport, if they're not transit passengers. They would use the city as just a stopover before they fly into other parts of the country to see touristic sites. If they're transit passengers who have maybe a 12-hour layover, a 9-hour layover, they don't have the opportunity to actually get out of the airport or do anything at all, or even understand what, through the gateway of the city, what this country is about. So what these projects offer is capitalizing on, on this opportunity to bring in people, even for short stopovers, capitalizing on the opportunity for people who are going to other parts of the country for tourism to also spend a few days and spend their money within Addis Ababa as well. So these projects, like I said, number one, there's a touristic component to them. There is an image building and a cleaning component to them, really having the city speak to its actual name of what it means, New Flower. And then there is a third component to it, which is creating job opportunities as well. In the beginning parts of the projects, so many people have been employed, and in the thousands, and the impact that they will have within their household level, the impact that they would have within their community level because of their spending abilities through this income that they're generating, has got an effect in that regard. So there's various components to these projects as well, and number one, the one that was just recently inaugurated is the Friendship Square component of the larger Shaggar Park project. Soon Ndoto Park would be also inaugurated. You have Unity Park here within the grounds of the Grand Palace, which is really history or an embodiment of what Maddamar means, because it looks at the assets, the historical assets that previous leaders have accumulated within here, and it makes it readily available to tell a part of our story.
I appreciate Maddamar synergy philosophy, which was coined by PM Abiy Ahmed to transform the country into the future paths. Was that effective in transforming the country over the past 2 years and a half?
Well, Addis, we're still in a period of reforms. So you're right, Maddamar as a philosophy.
It has got a huge reputation and praise because it's homegrown philosophy and ideology. But we are not witnessing, the right fit place in which Maddamar is applied. Maybe it works in a very implied way. Can you show me that?
Not necessarily an implied way. The one, because of the conversation that we had just talked about with regards to amalgamation of parties as well, that's a manifestation of Maddamar. Whereas before you had these siloed parties that were fragmented, and periphery, as I mentioned to you, them coming together is a sign of Maddamar, because they bring in the resources that they have, they bring in the assets that they have, they bring in the strengths that they have. So that's one aspect of Maddamar as well. If you're looking at it still politically outside of the main political party, look at the call that the Prime Minister has made for political parties to start forming larger coalitions. That's a manifestation of Maddamar. Because, like I mentioned to you, we're at almost 130-something parties. But for a country, as large as Ethiopia, do we need 130 parties with fragmented thoughts, with fragmented ideas? Rather, I'm sure that there's so many similarities that a lot of these political parties share as well. So the act that some of these political parties have taken in coming together is a manifestation of Maddamar as well. If you're looking at it from what I just explained to you with regards to the touristic sites as well that have been created, particularly in Ndoto Park that is in the process of being finalized, it is a manifestation of Madamar because you have the private sector that came in with their private financing. You have government that came in providing the infrastructure, the lights, electricity, and water provision. You have a lot of people with creative abilities and creative ideas who came in and put their fingerprint into what this final complete picture would look like. So people coming together and bringing the best part of what they have, that is a manifestation of Madamar as well. So there's so many manifestations of that as well. If you look at also the reforms in of itself, it doesn't look at the previous good that existed, and it doesn't deny that there have been fundamental progresses that have been made through various parts of Ethiopia's history as well. But what it does is it takes what is good and brings it and builds on it. But it also criticizes and puts into perspective that there were certain parts of our history as well, of previous administrations and regimes, that were not conducive to the democratic and prosperous Ethiopia that we want to build as well. So Madamar is really everywhere if we look to utilize it, if we choose to use it.
But some people criticize that Madamar synergy philosophy, the ideology, has got some void, shortcoming. For example, it doesn't work for for two odd things. You understand what I'm saying?
No, I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean by two odd things?
Things that which are not go together. Let's say, let's take from a political party's perspective, those who has, different view cannot go with another party which has completely different from their thoughts and ideologies. How do you put that?
Well, I think there's these criticisms emanate from not clearly understanding what Madamar is, because Madamar doesn't call for amalgamation or melting into one. What it asks for is you have positives, you have similarities, you have negatives, you have dissimilarities. So let's work on the positives and the similarities that you have, and let's find a common playing field. It does not mean that with even political parties, they cannot totally or completely 100% agree or disagree on everything. At the end of the day, one of the key things that brings all political parties together is that they want an Ethiopia that's developed. They want an Ethiopia that is prosperous. They want an Ethiopia that is positioned or positioning itself not only within Horn of Africa, but within the continent and the world at large. So if there's any political party that's working in opposition to this kind of ambition, which carries the dreams and the hopes of all Ethiopians, then I'm not entirely sure they're working in service to the country. But this is what Madamar is about as well. Like, what is the priority that we're working towards? And what are the strengths that we have to feed into that and create the reality that we want for our people?
Okay, Abiy has done so many things, we can mention a lot, right? Among others, he immediately revamped right after he took office the palace, right? Can you put it in a comparative way, the new palace with that of the old one?
Well, to be honest with you, because the progress of the Grand Palace started from the office, and the office component is related to what I was explaining to you earlier on with ergonomics, but it's also related with the philosophy of Madamar, because it's looking at what we have, what are the potentials that we have. The potentials are those that are not visible there yet, but are inherently there, that if you could capitalize on, if you could take away whatever is covering it, that you could actually exploit it for positive purposes as well. It's also looking at what existed. So the office renovation, for example, the frames existed, the basic structures existed as well, but for the Ethiopia that is forward-looking right now, for the Ethiopia that we're positioning to be the new horizon of hope, it didn't really match, or it doesn't really, reflect that new hope or that new narrative. So utilizing that framework, that is existing frame, that not only was part of the previous administration, but a previous regime as well, that had been created as part of that, taking that existing structure, which is as just an embodiment of Madamar, which is the good part, but then getting rid or removing the ones that are not in favor of where we want to go as well, the bad parts, so the dark part, the dirt part, all of that was taken and cleaned up as well. So now it's much more reflective of the prosperity ambitions that this country wants to hold. So these office renovations then moved on to, looking at what's available within the Grand Palace. The Grand Palace before was closed off from the public. It's just several years ago that certain sections of the population used to come in as part of historical celebrations or historical functions. But for the past 20-something years, these historical grounds, nobody knew what was inside there. If you look at previous footage as well, it shows you that they were a dumping ground for old, unused, military trucks, worn out and dilapidated buildings that really covered up all of this compound as well. But by cleaning it up, because there were still historical elements as well, by cleaning it up to make it conducive to the people, because this is the people's asset as well. This is the Ethiopian people's treasure as well. So revealing it, cleaning it up and revealing it to the population so they can understand our historical assets, so we can also understand what we're able to do for the potential that I mentioned to you earlier. So from something very little, we're also able to expound on a larger potential and vision for this country.
Okay, thank you. Recently, the government has changed its currency with denomination of 10, 50, 100, and 200, right? Why that decision has been undertaken?
So earlier on, I had mentioned to you that one of the important aspects of the homegrown economic reform agenda is stabilizing the macroeconomic environment. So the demonetization scheme has been undertaken as part of this stabilization component. I mean, the National Bank has said before that there has been a lot of money that has been floating outside of the noted system or the formal system as well. So this demonetization scheme enables bringing into the banks all of this money that is floating around. It curbs illicit financial flows. It curbs, kind of incidents and activities that are being supported by illegal financial flows as well. Arms trafficking, human trafficking, and so on that are being propped or that are being supported by financial or money that is outside the system. So this is something that it actually addresses as well. And just within the past few weeks, the National Bank of Ethiopia and a lot of banks are registering that a lot of money is coming into the system as well. So it is one way of balancing the macroeconomic environment.
Okay. Post-COVID, Ethiopia will be one of best tourist destination that are going to be visited, right? What do you say about it? With what regard, with what parameter Ethiopia is selected to be visited?
Well, Ethiopia has to be visited. And I don't say that just because we're Ethiopian, but as I had mentioned to you throughout our conversation, Ethiopia has a rich, history that would take not only a few days through tourism to come and understand, but there's, rich intricacies, historical intricacies that are visible if you go throughout the country. These are manifestations of these histories. If you go to different parts of the region, there are demonstrations of, the rich historical heritage that Ethiopia has. Ethiopia has got a rich culture with, over 76 nations and nationalities, 76 precisely, that is understood or acknowledged by the House of Federation. If you look at what that means in terms of diversity, in terms of the type of clothing, in terms of the type of food, in terms of the cultural nuances, there's so much to explore and understand in of itself as well. If you look at it from a natural perspective as well, the topography going from one place to another as well, there is so much that exists within Ethiopia. The crater lakes that are, along the Rift Valley line as well. There is so much in terms of, for the nature lover. The weather is really good. It's pleasant throughout the year as well. So that is one parameter as well. So there are also these new initiatives that are being undertaken, not just by the Prime Minister's initiatives, but because the government understands that tourism is a key component of its economy, that it could be one of the backbones of the economy. There are measures that are being taken to make sure that tourist destinations are accessible to people, that tourist destinations are, comfortable and conducive to people coming from different parts of the world as well. So these preparations are headed towards that, and there's an initiative, a multi-institution initiative under the theme of T'ena Yistilling that has been launched recently under the purview of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other federal entities to promote and position Ethiopia as one of the key primary destinations post-COVID.
Okay, do you have, any recommendation for Ethiopian and our global audiences that we should wait from this new administration?
Can you say that again, Adis?
What would you like to recommend for the entire public? It can be for Ethiopian, for international audiences. What should we wait from this new administration? Shall we wait an amazing miracle, maybe? Because it is on good track and it is on good move. That is why I said this.
Definitely. Come visit. Number one, what I would like to say is come visit. The second thing that I would like to say is contextualize, understand the context, because it's not always what makes it to the airwaves, because Ethiopia is much more than the negative imagery and the negative rhetoric that is being spun around Ethiopia. Ethiopians are beyond that as well. So incidents should not be the factor that paint the larger picture of what this country is. That it's not, one of the factors that paints a picture of what this administration's aspirations are for this country as well. So come visit, understand the context, understand the nuances of Ethiopia's history, Ethiopia's process of where it has been up to now, and the journey that Ethiopia is wanting to take here forth.
Okay, Your Excellency Bilene, thank you very much for your insight. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, Addis. Pleasure as well.
Okay, dear viewers, you have been watching Talk to OBN show. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.